Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Victor Neustroev and I welcome you to my next webinar. Today we are going to talk about the self-defense of the king. So the topic of the webinar is the king self-defense. Well, what we are going to talk about? We are going to analyze the games which illustrate how the king may defend himself. In other words, I'm going to show you that sometimes your king can be under a series of checks, attacks, and threats, but is still able to get hidden to the safe place. However, such positions requires a lot of calculations, and this is the most difficult aspect. If your king is exposed, you have to calculate a lot. Okay, so we are waiting for more people to come. I'm sure that today we don't experience any technical issues. So you see, I got some more lighting. So now I have 3 different lights, so the quality of the video should be much better. I'm talking about the camera window. Well, what about the sound? I also changed my sound settings and it should be slightly better, I think. Okay. So we are definitely waiting for more people to come. I'm sure everyone received a notification about the webinar, so everyone got the link. Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, the topic is interesting, but I want you to understand that this is a very complicated topic. It's fine if you don't understand something, because even for me it's hard. And even such a master of a combination like Grandmaster Garry Kasparov didn't like when his king was under the attack of the enemy pieces. So, and he was mainly trying to find, to play such positions and to choose these lines where the king is hidden, which is definitely good. But, well, once your king is at the open space, it can be attacked. And you have to calculate the lines. But remember that your king also has a special skill. It may defend himself, because the king may always escape and the king may hide behind your pieces. Especially if your opponent sacrifices his pieces and just doing check, trying to chase the king. This is where you can definitely play for a win. So let's say you're playing with black. Let's say white sacrifices a piece, initiates a strong attack, but you escape with the king. However, white doesn't have enough material to succeed with the attack. So, and finally you escape with the king and you win because of an extra piece. Something similar could happen in my yesterday blitz game. My opponent sacrificed the piece. He sacrifices the knight, and that knight sacrifice was unsound. I took the knight. My king became exposed, but because it was a blitz, I completely missed the checkmate in 1. So of course, such a player like me shouldn't blunder checkmate in 1, even if it's a blitz. But I don't know what happened to me yesterday. I played really badly. So if before that with a standard time control my performance was 2400, this time my performance was under 1900 and I've scored only 6 of 11. So it's a really bad result. Anyway, I need to practice more with Blitz, and maybe soon, once I figure out how to get better in Blitz, you'll get a notification that I release a new course, the secrets of Blitz, for example. So this is this is my plan. Anyway, today we are talking about the king, so let me check. Let me check if you have any questions. I'm streaming this event at several platforms. The main one is Chessland's website. I'm also doing it on my Twitch and YouTube accounts, and there is also a stream at Facebook inside Chessland's page. Okay. If you have any other questions, we can start with them, or if not, then we will continue to the main task. And the first game that I would like to illustrate is the game between Boris Spassky and Mikhail Tal. Well, you know, Mikhail Tal was a very gifted tactician. But here he had to defend his position. If you look at the position and try to evaluate, you may realize that it's actually approximately, well, materially it's equal. However, this black king is more in danger rather than the white king, and the white tries to take advantage of it. Rook g8, king f6, queen d6, check, the queen blocks. It's okay, well, white can repeat and draw the game if they continue with queen f4, but they play queen g3. So black moves their queen to e3, having some ideas in mind. They also do this, they cover these squares, they want to stop this move, and they also want to vacate another square for the king on e6. Well, so the game continued with h4 here. Rook comes to e2, queen d6 check. So why these two pieces should be on the same file? Because in such a case, there will be no check which would deliver a fork and threaten the king and the rook simultaneously. That's why when your king is at the open space, you should have in mind that your opponent may deliver a check and capture the piece on the other flank. So to not make it possible, try to keep your pieces defended. Queen e6, queen e4, and queen f5. White continues with queen h6. So this is a threat. Queen h7 is a threat. Maybe h5 is also a threat. King e7. Queen f8 check. King goes back to f6. Queen g7, king e7, and soon we come to a critical moment of the game. So rook e8. Rook e8, the idea of this move is to deliver a check on a7. That's why black continues with this move. Queen d7 covering this square. Queen f8, the king has to move. Rook a6 is a check, and this is where we need our pieces. So, well, when you play the game and your king is at the open space, don't only hope that your king will be able to escape. Try to use your pieces in order to bring them closer to the king. This is how your defense will be more successful. Queen h8, king e7, rook e8. This rook goes to e1, and this is the most critical moment of the game. If you were white in this position, which move would you play? Looks like these two pieces are not enough to succeed and deliver anything dangerous to the black king. Okay, so I'm waiting for your suggestions. What would you play for white here? Okay, there are some nice suggestions by Kate. So with the idea to weaken the pawns and open the king more. Okay, yeah, so the suggestion is to play f4, which is definitely an interesting move. Okay, I'm waiting for other suggestions. King g3 to bring the king to the action. Well, this is another good point, to bring the king to the action. But this is what was played in the game, actually. However, f4 is a better move. Yes, it does stop a check from queen c7. The other thing this move do is f5 in order to expose the king more. For example, h5, rook c8, rook e4 maybe. Well, rook c8 restricts the queen. Now queen c7 is no longer possible, and it's time to play f5. Well, you may say, what's going on? Because then the white king becomes even weaker. Yes, it does become weaker, but black cannot take advantage of it. For example, what black can do? If they decide to take here, they simply lose the game after this move. Queen d8, king e6, and this is a mate. I also see that the rook on h4 is hanging, but if we can deliver a checkmate, then what's the point of taking this rook? So queen d8 and rook c6 is a mate. If they take with the g pawn, which is also interesting, then queen f8, king f6, and what do you think white has in mind here? What was the point of losing this pawn and letting them capture with the g pawn? So nice idea actually here, here, and queen g5. But then here goes the king to d6, to e6. Okay, let me show you. So this, queen g5, king e6, and if you take this rook, black takes this rook. First of all, it's rook c6. Why? Because if the queen takes now, it's queen h6. So there is no pawn on g6. The king becomes more exposed. Well, you may say, what if they just simply move the king to g5? Well, yes, it's possible. But then we have so many nice moves. We start with queen g7. King goes there. And then, well, king f2. Sorry, not king f1, but king f2. With the idea of g3, which is a mate, right? Or maybe if we don't want to calculate the lines, we can play this to save our rook and still threaten with this. Even if they play this move, g3 still leads to a checkmate. So that was the main concept of f5, to open the position and get the king more exposed, to let these two pieces get a better coordination. Well, you may say that g takes f5 is not obligatory. True, rook e4, f takes g6 check. Well, because if f takes g6, I think the game is over in just a few moves, right? Like that. So f takes g6, rook e1, king goes to h2. Another check, queen to d6, g3. Another check, king goes to h1. And this is a winning position. Why? Because if they keep doing checks, king comes to f1, no more checks, but this king is in a danger because the pawn cover was destroyed. So that was a possible way for white to play for a win. Instead, they play king g3, which they thought is a good option to bring the king to the action, and maybe that king may shoulder this king. Well, black could continue with this move, and after the king escapes, just this. However, instead they played h5, what they originally wanted. By the first glance, the move is quite logical, it stops the activity of the pawns and saves the pawn, but it actually creates more problems. King f2. rook goes to e6, and in this position, just such move like that would be enough. Why? Well, rook a7 is a threat. The king is absolutely trapped. The only way to escape is this. But then after g4, the position of the king becomes really compromised. So now, for example, there is no way to go to h6. Queen h8 is a checkmate. But if there was a pawn on h7, it was possible. So Boris Spassky didn't notice it. He played rook c8, which is another mistake. Instead, rook b6 would be a nice move, and after queen here, queen is6, kind of a regroup of the pieces. So not this move because of a checkmate, but this move to attack the rook. After which the position is still approximately equal. However, in the game, here black played rook d6, and that was a mistake. Queen f8, king f6, and again g4 would lead to a winning position. Well, white missed it again. You see, this position requires so many calculations and a lot of knowledge of tactical ideas. That's why it's really hard and you have to calculate. For example, if you play such a position with a low time control, you are likely to make so many mistakes. Even with the longer time controls, the mistakes will be. So rook e8, rook e6, if the rooks are exchanged, then it's even more favorable for black. And after a few moves, you'll see how the position changed. Rook c8, queen e6, and king g3. Queen comes to d6 with a check, king h3. Now black decides to counterattack. Rook e1. They are threatening with a mate on h1. g3, rook g1. Now the pawn is hanging. f4. Rook goes to e1. And, well, the best thing was to exchange the rooks and pass the game into the endgame and equalize the position. But rook c2, in order to play defensively, which is usually not a good strategy. Which move would you recommend for black in this position? What do you think? Now black is into the attack. So what do you think, guys? No, I'm checking your comments. So what black should do in this position? Look at the king and what do you think black should do in order to attack the king and succeed with this attack? So it's not enough just to deliver a check. This check, the king goes to g2, let's say. Queen e3, queen f3. Yes, it looks good, but seems to be quite slow. For example, queen e3, queen c8. Rook e3 and then queen e4. Well, but you hang your pieces. So let's say you play rook e3, they can still do this move, or they may ignore and play, let's say they allow you to play queen e4 and then they continue with this move. At least there should be a perpetual check. So the key move here is queen e6. Why this? Every time the king is in a check, it moves and creates a discovered check, a so-called cross check. And so this is how black gains the tempo anyway. Moreover, they are about to checkmate. In the game, it was played rook f2, and you'll see how the game ended. But let's talk about this move, because it's time for white to understand the main problem, that their king is now exposed, and take some immediate actions. Then queen takes e8, rook takes e8, rook h1 check, king goes there, and rook d1. What does it mean? It means this in-game is completely winning. This is under attack, the king has more space and can enter the enemy camp either here or here, I think through e4 in order to promote the d-pawn. But in the game it was played rook f2, rook h1, king g2, queen e4. No moves with the king. That's why this rook has to block. And what now? What do you think? Rook f1, nice. Rook f1, king f1, and I'm not sure if you can deliver a mate, but at least you grab several pawns. Rook f1, king takes f1, queen f3, king e1, queen g3, and you capture the f4 pawn too. Yes, it is a winning position, but there is a better move. Rook f1, well, it's a kind of a problem because the king has to go to f6. But I think there is no perpetual check, because queen c6, king g7. Let's say rook f1, queen c8, king f6, queen h8, king g7, and again it should be okay. Queen e2, rook f2, then you can play rook h2, of course, and I think it's still winning, but there is a much better move. Yes, it's king g4. So you remember when white in this position continued with king g3, they wanted to bring the king to the action. But the king was useless. However, this time the situation is vice versa, and king g4 is a really helpful move to exploit the pin. So what happens now? In the game it was played queen c8, and after f5 white resigned. Why? Well, let's discuss, because the only thing they can do, well, there are actually several things that they can do. So, but let's say they play queen c3 in this position in order to defend here. Then the game would continue with such move like rook f1. King takes f1, queen f3, queen takes f3, king f3, and then these pawns are lost and black simply promotes. Okay, that was queen c3 move. What if instead they take here? Then queen takes here. And what now? If the king goes to g1, it's simply this move. I'm checking if there is anything better. Okay, no. It's simply this check. King goes to the second rank. Let's say here, another check, king goes here, and then this, threatening with a mate, and I don't see any defense. No checks, no defenses. If the king goes to h2, it's well, it's a check. King goes to h1, and still king h3, threatening with a mate. And that's it. And the queen cannot help with the defense. So what I want you to remember, when the king is at the open space, it doesn't mean that the king is checkmated obligatory. However, a lot of lines should be well calculated. Please don't refuse calculation. If you have time, do this job to make sure that your king is relatively safe. But in order to succeed, if there is no certain way of taking advantage of the king being in the center, such as a fork, such as a matinette, then the attacking side should be looking at how to get more forces into the action. For example, in this game, it was possible with such move like f4, which would defend this king too, but would expose the enemy king's position. Another thing that you may remember, especially if the enemy king is compromised too, and this is what we'll see in our in our other games that I prepared for today, that your king may enter the enemy camp and provide you with extra support when you overtake the initiative and start attacking the enemy king. So in order to succeed, the attacking side should bring more resources. And as a defensive side, I want you to keep your pieces closer to the king to make it possible to defend and block the checks. Look at this very nice example when such a move like queen e6 was played. So rook c2 and queen e6, defending from here and threatening to move the king away and attack the white king, for example. Okay, fine. We have the second example now. This is the game between Viktor Korchnoi and Anatoly Karpov. Okay, so I'm checking your questions. If you have anything to say, then you are welcome, of course. In this position, it's white to move. White played bishop a3. But yeah, I'm checking your questions. We can give a checkmate. Okay. Okay, fine. So yeah, what happened in the game? Bishop a3. Rook moves. Knight f5, threatening with a fork, and that forces us to go our king further to the place of action. Well, you may say that this is the end game. You don't have to worry about any mating ideas because it looks like white doesn't have enough material to checkmate, and I partially agree with you. So here moving the king to the center is unlikely to lead to a checkmate, but it may lead to some unpleasant consequences, such as checks, forks, threats, and even such checks which improve the position of the enemy pieces. Let's say if, well, just an example. Let's say the king is on e8, there is no pawn on e5, he plays rook e1 doing a helpful move. He puts his rook to the open file. And instead of doing something helpful, on your end, you have to move your king once again. This is how your opponent uses your king as the object of the attack. That's why if you see that your king in the center may become the object of the attack, you should decide and you should consider whether the benefits that you get with the king in the center overcome the disadvantages, such as activation of the enemy pieces by doing checks. So you have to lose tempi by moving the king, and they try to get a better coordination and improve their pieces' locations. So always have it in mind. The game continued with f takes e5, rook takes e5, rook b5, with the idea to create a passed pawn. And well, rook e2 is a logical move, but knight c4 was played. What I don't like about this move is that rook b7 is now possible. Of course, if white exchanges, then the king is absolutely fine. Well, this move is a blunder, right? If this move is played, then it's rook takes d6, bishop takes d6, right? Rook takes b5, and if a takes b5, it's knight d6. But here you may say, what if they play something like that as an intermediate move, and rook d7 doesn't work because the knight is pinned, but king f6 works. And this is how you end up with two knights for a rook. Which is also fine for black, especially having in mind that they have a strong pawn on d4. So rook b7 check was quite natural. King e6, knight checks on d4, so black loses their pawns, white activates their pieces, and at the same time is delivering checks. But it's not the end. So in such a position, the king cannot be checkmated, and this is probably the main king d5. Well, such a move like knight c2 would be a better option here. Let's say knight c2, rook a4, bishop f8. They capture these two pawns, but we have a kind of an attack. So knight d2, rook goes there, King c6 to unpin with a tempo. Rook g7, knight fe4. So I think white would win this game. However, not everything is so clear. Again, the number of pieces is equal. Well, if you imagine a situation when this a rook pair is exchanged, a knight for a bishop was exchanged, and this knight was sacrificed for these two pawns, it's a theoretical draw because a rook and a knight cannot win against a rook. So in the game it was knight f3. Knight takes a3, knight takes a5, king takes a5, and this is how white exchanged their two minor pieces for a rook. But as a compensation, they got several pawns. So one pawn, knight c4, rook f4 check, knight goes to e4. Well, what else? Because if this move, there can be a pin with rook c7 move. Now let me show you. So this, and the rook a4 doesn't work. So that's why knight e4. This is how the kings will be protecting each other. But here, black, of course, understands that they lose the h7 pawn. However, starts doing active actions. Instead of just moving the king anywhere, they think about how this king may be helpful. The king is not into a mating threat, so that's why it's time to take advantage of the king's activity. King e3, rook f3 check, king e2, rook h7. Rook a4 looks attractive. Knight cd2 was played, which is also a nice move. There is no check on f2, so the rook has to go somewhere else. Rook c6, threatening the mate, because of the perfect position of this king on e2. What do you think white should do in this position? Who can tell me? Okay, guys, what are your suggestions? Rook a1 looks dangerous. Yes, it does look dangerous. Maybe h3. Maybe h3, but h3 seems to be dangerous too, because this check, king goes to h2, then it's knight f1, king goes to the first rank, then knight g3, and finally a checkmate on h1. So it's definitely not h3. Well, maybe g3. g3, then knight f3, king g2, and black can draw the game here with such move like knight e1, because the king cannot escape. In such a case, it's a fork on g5. So the king has to either go to g1 or to f1. If it goes to g1, it's just a repetition. If it goes to h1 instead, then king f1, threatening with this. And the only way to save is to sacrifice the rook for that knight, either the h or the a rook. And this position, well, after white loses these 3 pawns, the position becomes drawing. So g3 or g4 would do the same thing. However, in the game, rook a1 was played. And what's wrong with the rook a1 move? Who can tell me? So who knows? Yeah, the rook now is forced to defend the first rank, but rook a1 was already a blunder, which black may take advantage of. So rook g6. Okay, rook g6 is a nice suggestion. Rook g6, I think they will play this move. Will they? Probably they will, to get the king to g2 then. Yeah, rook g6, it's g3. What else? Okay, so there is a good suggestion by Ollie Williams, as well as from Perumal Krishna. So it's knight f3. After which they have to take, because if they move, it's a checkmate in 2. However, if they take, it's still a checkmate in 2. Well, yeah, in 2 in one case, and in 3 on the other case. Okay, so this is how the game ended. Actually, after knight f3, white resigned because they get checkmated. So what I want you to remember about this position, well, if you look at let's say this example here, definitely white doesn't have enough material to deliver a checkmate. That's why bringing the king to the center, having in mind that we have pawns on both flanks, is generally a good idea. But you should calculate and try to realize the consequences of doing it and compare the benefits that you get with the king in the center as well as disadvantages. So, and your benefits is that the king is closer to the place of action, and once you exchange more pawns, the king may go to the queen side, or once you get more exchanges, the king may go to the queen side and capture the pawn, or the king may help the d pawn to get promoted. So you should compare these benefits with disadvantages, and your disadvantages are that your king is under the attack and your opponent may create forks or may just deliver checks and improve his pieces in order to do something else, while you can't prepare for that because you have to play with your king and you have to move this king. But once you see that the king in the center and no longer in the danger, try to take advantage of the king activity. Here, Anatoly Karpov decided that the best way to take advantage of the king activity is to get the king closer to the enemy king. Together with 2 knights, it's possible to initiate some dangerous attack, which at least would provide Karpov with a draw. But white made a mistake, and that's the reason why Viktor Kachnoy lost the game. Okay, so number 3 probably is the most important example, which takes a lot of time. Let's discuss it. This is the game played between Vugar Gashimov and Alexander Grischuk. So Vugar Gashimov was one of the best grandmasters of Azerbaijan. He died several years ago. Well, but this game was very interesting. And well, Grishuk that time was a Russian champion of Russia. This is actually a theoretical position, and there are how many? 107 games played here. Grishuk was playing against Gashimov twice in this position. But in this game, he played a novelty. He played Rook h7 move. What a weird move. What does this rook do? First of all, the idea of this move is to defend, to get the rook defending. So g5 is not a threat because of h takes g5. Because definitely, in order to expose this king, white is going to push the pawn to g5. It forces the knight to go away, and also the pawn on e6 becomes under the attack. So rook h7, rook f1, knight c6, trying to get more pieces involved. Knight takes c6, queen takes c6, and e5, which is another nice move. What does this move do? Well, several things. First of all, after d takes e5, this file is open. That means that the king will be in a more danger. Second, it opens the bishop. The bishop may attack the rook, and after that g5 can be played. It also vacates the e4 square for the knight for future actions. So bishop d3 was played. If rook goes there, it's g5. And after knight goes to d7, white has a really strong attack. That's why e4, while black has enough defenders. However, knight takes e4, and after this knight gets distracted, queen h5 is possible. King goes to d7. So this is how black got an extra piece. And white hopes to deliver a checkmate as a compensation to this piece. Which is, well, by looking at this position by the first glance, you may say that yes, looks like the king is in trouble and it's possible. Moreover, the next move that was played by white was rook d1. Now, if the d file is clear, the king is in danger, so maybe there is no checkmate, but there will be a discovered attack, which would allow white to gain some pieces. So it's time to move the knight, but once you move the knight, you lose the rook. So that's why Grishchuk here plays a rook h8. And Gashimov played a natural move, bishop f4. However, this move is a mistake. Why this move is a mistake? Well, because with this move, Gashimov didn't think about his own king's safety. And the second thing is that he instead had a better move. What do you think white should do in this position? So for those of you who is interested, which opening was it, I can tell you. It was neither variation with bishop g5. So just a sec, let me share the screen. Please look at my screen. So what opening was it? It was neither. Bishop g5 and e6, f4, queen b6. Attacking the b2, queen d3, queen b2, rook b1, queen e3, f5, exposing the king, bishop e7, f takes e6, f takes e6, bishop e2, queen e5. g4, h6, queen h3. So this is how the position appeared. Quite popular. Okay, let me delete it. I mean, not. Let's go back. So let's go back to our position after queen h5 check was played. So what do you think? What was queen h5, rook goes back to h7? What was a better move for white in this position? What are your suggestions? Bishop b5. Well, bishop b5 is interesting. Let's say queen b5, and after you move the bishop, I can block on d6. So I think I'm fine with it. Knight, well, no, we are asking about which move white could play. Well, black could play b5. Okay, bishop e4 is suggestion, but this move is a check. This is a cross check. However, then the king just goes away. I don't see how you can continue the attack. So this move that I'm asking you to find was actually rook f7. What's What a move. Well, it's a pin. And now it will be more difficult to defend on d6. Let's say knight c3, just as an example. Queen e5. The knight is under attack. Let's say the knight captures here, but then it's rook e7. And queen captures g7. So if king d6, it's bishop here. And after c4, it's over, right? The queen has to be sacrificed. But if king goes here, then white takes the rook with a check. And this position is also winning. So let's say if the king goes there, it's bishop g6. And if b6 is played, then queen d4 check, king c7, and bishop e4. So black is faced with serious problems. So let's say this, the queens are exchanged, then another check, and the rook is taken. So white is likely to win it because of the bishop pair. However, again, it's not the best. It's not a so obvious position. Two bishops are definitely better, but who knows? Maybe black finds how to draw. Okay, let's go back. So knight c3 is one of the possibilities. The other move can be knight d6. And this move I consider to be more natural, but then bishop b4. And for example, well, if you play knight f7, then you have to evacuate the king really quickly. In this position, you are up the exchange, but at least they have a draw with a repetition. If, let's say, instead of taking on f7, you play rook f8 move, then it's bishop d6. And the point is that you cannot take with the bishop. Instead, you have to take with the king or with the queen. And in both cases, it is bishop b5. That's why you may take the rook, but then queen takes. And it's basically the same. Once anybody takes on d6, it's bishop b5. Let's say queen c3 first. And this is where the maximum that black has is a draw. Like that. So this position is equal. White has better pieces activity, but this king is also compromised, and it can be checked. While it's hard to reach this, it's hard to attack the king on b8. So rook f7 was a better move, and that move would provide white with some practical chances to play for win, but most likely if black plays properly, the game would end in a draw. However, bishop f4 was played, and black completely missed that now their king is under the attack. Bishop b4 check. Well, if the king goes 2-2, it's just a fork. King goes there, and this fork is required to not only take the rook, but to exchange the queens. Once the queens are gone, this move or something else is not risky anymore. So, for example, queen takes c5, bishop c5, it's still a check, and then the rook is lost. If let's say king goes to g2, for example, then it's queen h5. Let's say bishop b5 check. It's a double check, that's why the king has to move. The king goes there. Then g takes h5, and simply knight takes d1. And then the bishop is lost, so black is winning. That's why c3 to stop it. Knight takes c3. Bishop comes to d2. How would you play in this position? And what do you think black's main goals are? Yes, this king is compromised too, but black has extra material already. So what? Bishop a5, what for? Queen g2 is a bit dangerous. Are you going to checkmate? I'm just talking about the general concept, what you should do in such a case. There are two things that you should remember once your king is at the open space and has to defend himself. Okay, so let me answer this question. Okay, queen d6 by Brian is a good point. But Brian, I would say queen d5. Well, you are right that the queen has to move because you need to vacate more squares for the king. This is true. The other thing that you should remember, guys, that when you have extra material, you'd better exchange pieces. This is how you simplify and make it easier. So no mistakes can be played. Well, I mean, with fewer pieces on the board, it's quite unlikely that you missed some complications and lose the game because of it. So rook f7, king goes to c6, and rook c1 was played. Well, if, for example, queen d5, it takes d5, and then rook c1, it's d4. So that's why it's not beneficial for white to exchange the queens here. That's why rook c1 right away. Now, what do you think? So, Grishchuk was over 2700 actually. What do you think, which move he played? Who can guess? Yeah, hello to everyone who joined us recently. What we are going here, what we are learning here, I'm doing a webinar about the self-defense of the king. So I'm providing you with examples and some tips of what you should do when your king gets at the open space. Well, there is a good suggestion of playing this move, queen h1, maybe. It's quite interesting. For example, then let's say the king goes to f2. How do you continue? Your queen is hanging. Probably you have to retreat. Okay, queen h1 is not beneficial because you have to retreat back. Okay, so let me check what are your suggestions. Queen takes a2, interesting. But queen takes a2, I think you are too greedy about this pawn because you have extra piece and you are taking another pawn which doesn't play any significant role here. And I think in such a case they just gain a piece back with this move. So it's not queen e2. Here the best move was to take another piece. However, that was extremely risky because after such move like queen e5, this king is in trouble. Well, it was possible to play e5, let's say bishop c3, and if bishop c3 the queen is lost. So king goes to b6, then a3 to get rid of the bishop, then a bishop takes, rook takes, and queen d5. And this is where the king could try to escape. So queen e3, king a6, queen e2, b5, a4, rook b8, and then maybe rook d8 to indirectly defend the king, because now there is a threat of doing this move, and queen h2, to exchange the queens, not to capture the pawn. For example, if the game would continue with this move, it's rook b6. And such a move like this, yeah. So if a takes b5, queen takes, it's fine. Well, actually, not everything is clear. They can, for example, continue with this move. And rook c6 doesn't make much sense. But I think it's a winning position. You just do this. King takes, then take here, rook takes. And with 2 extra pawns, it's winning. Moreover, you'd capture the 3rd pawn. Yes, it is winning. So a5 was a really good move, but it was hard to find it for a human player. And that's why such move like king b6, which Alexander Grishuk played in the game, is more human and more natural. The king tries to escape to a7. There is no attack anymore, and this bishop is still hanging. So, well, taking here means queen d3. And after bishop b4, it's fine. Just this move, and the bishop is taken back. So it's still extra piece, but the king is one step closer to from his safety. If, for example, in this position, rook c3, which makes more sense, this time queen d3 would be a blunder because of such move like this. Look, queen c5, king goes to b8, it's a mate. And the other option is to block with b6, but okay, no, there is a pin, so there is no way to play b6. So rook c3, bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, and in this position, instead of taking on d3, it makes sense to play this move, rook d8. You are still covering the a5 square, and you are pressuring the bishop. So let's say queen d5, e takes d5, and black is up the exchange. Why queen d5? But what else can be done? For example, let's say they try to save the bishop, then it's basically the same, but with the pawn on h5. Extra exchange for black and more winning chances. In the game, bishop e3 check was played, which is a nice check because the king cannot escape to a7 and then to b8, but the king goes to a5. a3. If bishop takes, it's rook c3. How would you play for black in this position? So remember, we have extra piece, and we should think about our king's safety. Okay, so there is a good point from Pirmal, queen h1, king f2, bishop c4. In which position? You mean bishop c3? Ah, maybe here. No. Okay, so I didn't get in which position. Queen d6 threatened mate. You mean queen queen d3 threatens a mate here. Let's say a3 was played and then queen d3. Yeah, well, you cannot play queen d3, it's pinned. It does create a mating threat, but not when the king is on a5. Some moves before. Ah, you mean here queen d3, but this is what we discussed. Then queen e5. So there is a threat of doing this move and this move, as well as to take on c3. That was a check. No. So you see, if queen d3 now, it's queen e5. There is no mate on e2. And if you do this, you lose the queen because your knight is pinned. Ah, maybe in this position, queen h1. Ah, if king f2, it's bishop here. Got it. So king f2, bishop, and I said that you have to retreat with the queen, and if bishop here, I got it, It's just queen c5. Queen c5, because after king c5, I just take this queen. You see here the number of pieces is equal. Black is only 2 pawns up, but they have so many pieces hanging. Well, e6 is not hanging, and their king is in a danger. So I think it's favorable for white. Okay, so king b6, bishop e3, king a5, a3. So here we are looking of what black should do. How black does two functions: keep extra piece and secure their king at the same time. By the way, could you please, if you enjoy my content, can you please like this video on YouTube or even subscribe to my YouTube channel? Or maybe to my Twitch account if you are watching it on Twitch. So what's the problem with queen d3? The problem of queen d3 is that there is a pin. So the queen cannot move anywhere from the fifth rank. Taking here means rook c3. But maybe it's not so bad. So let's say, taking here rook c3, you have this move. Okay, nice. That's why rook a1 will be played. Rook a1, and how do you play here? Let's say king b4 maybe. Then rook f4, and after king b3 it's bishop c4. Okay, no, it doesn't work. So rook a1, queen h5, g takes h5, king b4. Now it's still the same, but then it's rook a3. Okay, no, well, bishop c4 maybe, but okay, bishop c4, king goes there, bishop here, and if you take here, it's just king d1, after which you are white is threatening with two mates. That is quite risky. So taking on e3 is not a good possibility. What else do we have? Okay, bishop c5 by Brian. Knight e2 also is suggested. Bishop c5 seems to be interesting, but so let's say they take on c5. Every time you want to deliver a check, let's say queen h1, it is bishop g1, which is a cross check. At least bishop g1, maybe there is a better move. However, I think that bishop g1 is fine. So bishop c5 doesn't look good. Knight e2. What about knight e2? Take. If knight takes, it's rook c5. If king takes, then I still believe it's a losing position. For example, bishop c5. And if king goes there, it's bishop c4. Yeah, it's a losing position. So if the king goes, let's say here, then queen takes queen and rook a1. And no, I think the same works when the king goes there. Then rook f4 works. Rook f4 and bishop c4 on the next move. Okay, fine. So yes, this is a problem. That's why after a3, Grishchuk prepared such move like king a4. So can you imagine it? He sacrifices the piece back, but captures on d3 then. And now this king is relatively safe. Queen a5, king b3. So no more checks are possible. He keeps an extra piece and takes advantage of the enemy king's weakness. That's the point. Rook takes c3. What else? If, for example, he goes to f2 to avoid the checkmate, it's check here, and then queen captures the bishop, and then the rook. That's why rook c3. Queen c3, bishop d2 check. It's extra rook for black in this position. This is another good point of how to play. What do you think? The queen is under attack, so if we move the queen, let's say, back to d3, then what do you think What do you think white will play here? What comes to your mind? Okay, so queen b2 better than this. Okay, well, we will talk about queen b2. Just let's talk about this first. So I'm using Chess, and I'm streaming through Streamlabs desktop. This is the application I'm using to stream. So it's OBS Streamlabs. I can stream through Chess and Chessbase, but I choose Chess because it's easier to switch from one game to another game. On Chessbase, you have to open several windows. And also, sometimes there is a problem on Chessbase when you run the engine. It can consume too much CPU, and your stream may be just frozen for a while. Okay, anyway, 8 takes b4 with king b3 coming after. Well, it's not there. It's not a losing position. It's possible to play b5 here. What does this move do, b5? This move vacates the b4 square for the queen. So, for example, the game would continue, well, I don't know. Well, a takes b5 is not possible. And if the queen takes b5, it's a deadly attack. King a4 is a blunder. So king a2, rook f2, and that's it. So this is the next move. And then queen c1, which leads to a mate. So that's why in this position, the only way to play for win is to play... okay, we wanted to analyze this move, queen b2. Queen b2, it's even worse because of rook f3. So if the king goes there, this is a mate. That's why the king goes there, but I think it's still a problem because there is no way of blocking. And if the king goes there, then rook b3 at least, and the queen is lost. So b6 was played. So this queen is hanging. Let's hang the other queen. However, after queen takes b6, it's possible to move this queen because b5 this time isn't so dangerous. Moreover, it's possible to move with the check, and this is what Grishuk takes advantage of. King d1. He played bishop b7. However, the best option was to play this move, and after b5 it would be a5. But okay, bishop b7. So hanging the bishop, but bringing the rooks to the game. Queen takes b7. Well, rook takes b7 was also possible, but didn't make any difference. Rook h d8, there is a pin. It's only extra exchange, and the king is on the other side of the board, which means it can be potentially vulnerable. But the good point is that it's covered with the enemy pawn on b4. Rook f3, king goes to e2, rook f2, and then to avoid any problems, the king goes to b1. It also shoulders the enemy king. Queen f3, rook ac8. So the king had to travel from g8 from e8 to b1. So king d7, king c6, king b6, king a5, king a4, king b3, king b2, king b1. So the king is here. This is the way he traveled, but every time the king was relatively safe because of the black pieces activity. Black was able to compensate their king weakness, while white didn't have enough material on that side of the board where the king moved to. They also had to secure their king. If, let's say, the pawn was on g2, h3, and the king was on h1, I am sure white would win the game. But because of their own king, because of the problem with their own king, they faced with such a problem. So queen b3, the last chance, but queen b2 and no more checks. It's just possible to exchange, but in this position the bishop cannot move. It's a pin. If, let's say, not queen takes b2 but some random move, then queen c1 and the position is completely lost. So at least you can do rook d2, queen d2 and continue with rook c2, creating a pin. So this is how Alexander Grishuk won his game. What I want you to remember, well, I'm not sure if you can calculate like Grishuk did, but you at least should understand such strategic moments and strategic aspects of a game. Like when you see that your king is at the open space, you should not only look at how your opponent can attack your king, but you should also look at which prophylaxis to play in order to hide the king to the safe place. Or can you initiate a counterplay and distract enemy pieces from an attack creation to the defense of their own king, which happened here. For example, because of this pin, a lot of white opportunities of continuing the attack were lost. And they had to place this move to create a pin and to not initiate any other active actions. Well, okay, so it's a good webinar, I think. Maybe it's too complicated for some of you. However, let's sum it up. Let's sum 3 things to remember from the webinar. So when the king goes to an open space, it doesn't mean that the game is lost. The position of the king can be compensated with your pieces activity as well as with the enemy king's weakness too. When it's the end game and your king goes to the center, which is quite a common practice, think about the benefits that you get and compare them to disadvantages, which you are likely also to face with once your opponent starts activating his pieces and delivering checks at the same time. And the third thing, so once your king becomes under the attack at the open space at the center, try to keep pieces closer to the king to be ready to defend the king and block the checks from files and diagonals. And of course, activate your king once you see an opportunity to take advantage of the enemy king weakness too. Okay, that's all. So now I'm listening to your suggestions regarding our next webinars. Well, there will be a masterclass in early November and the second masterclass in late November by 2 our coaches. But the next weekend, it will be my webinar again. Which topics do I have? Let me tell you. So what are your suggestions? If you have any suggestions, I'll definitely take a look at them. But let me tell you what do we have. So tactics in Benoni defense, Sicilian defense, how to play against Keres attack, Caracan for black against the advanced variation of Caracan for black when e4 when e5 was played. play like a Liruza Firuja, and positional play against King's Indian pawn structures. This is what I have, and this is what I'm going to show you. And I'm also planning to do another webinar. Let me find which topic. How to save losing positions. This is another webinar. Okay, Nimzovich middle game, pawn structures. Okay, there was also a suggestion for a study plan for a 1000 rated player. Okay. So there is a question from Perumal Krishna. Can you reply for comments? Yes, I can, but which comment? Did I miss anything? Can you please duplicate this one if I missed it? Yeah, I'm actually replying, but okay, please send your question again. I don't see it. Yeah, the one about King's Indian pawn structures might be helpful. Study plan for 1000 players. Yeah, but this is a long webinar. Maybe I'll do a masterclass regarding this topic. Yeah, but not in the nearest future. However, maybe in December. Okay, guys, do you have any other questions? So if not, then I just remind you. Yeah, so if you have anything, I don't see any comment, any question to answer, but so we are not finished yet. So you have a minute or two to send me your questions. However, I want you to remind about our online chess school that I am a co-founder of. So this is our main page, chesslands.com, and this is where you have a chance to schedule your free chess lesson again with one of our coaches. So you click here, then you choose the coach that you want. Let it be, let's say, FIDE master Armin Mushevich. So then you choose the time that works for you. You can even adjust your time zone. So now it's for it's our time zone, Eastern Standard Time. I'm living in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So it's America, Argentina, Buenos Aires. So this is my time zone. So, and the schedule is adjusted. Then I choose the time that works perfectly for me. Then I choose my then I submit my name and my family name, then I enter my email, and then I click proceed to a payment. But there is no payment. However, we ask you to enter your card number, and we hold $2 on your card. And this money is released within a few days. So don't worry, we don't charge, we just hold. If we don't do this, then students are likely to book classes, but they won't appear at the lesson. So people who enter their card number are more serious about chess. This is what we noticed. So then you enter your card number, then you click book, and the lesson is scheduled. A Zoom link will be sent to you 15 minutes before the class starts. If you are going to book a 1 hour lesson, so trial lessons are 20 minutes lessons, but if you want to book a 1 hour class, then you can do the same thing. Click here, book your lesson. Then you choose the coach you want. Let's say it's International Master Berlib Zlatanovic. Don't forget to adjust your time zone where you're living. So let's say it's Europe, let's say Madrid. The time is adjusted. You choose what works for you. Let it be, let's say, let it be the 25th of October, 2 p.m. So you enter your name. And of course, 1 hour classes are paid classes, so you should go proceed to the payment, enter your card number, and this is where we will charge you $40. So we are not freezing them, we are charging them. So this is where you pay. And if you book a free class, we just freeze $2 and then this money are released. Okay, fine. So let me quickly check if there are any new questions. Okay, so John says that he wants a class about how to save lost positions as well as tactics in Benoni. Well, probably I don't see the comment, it's invisible for me. Whether it was a question or what. Okay, I'm just quickly checking if there are any more questions. No more. Here, no more. Okay, guys, thank you for coming to my webinar. So let's meet next weekend, next Sunday, same time. I'm going to prepare something new for you, which I'm sure you will enjoy. So see you.